2.5 weeks away from Draft Day 2022, and it's feeling like old times here at the Star in Frisco. We actually had draft prospects visit this last week. Can I interest you in an offensive lineman from Austria? And could the Cowboys draft a linebacker in the first round for the second straight year? It's next on the Blitz.
Pops out to the right, breaks a tackle. They blitz it. Prescott throws it down the right side for Lamb. Caught it! Back to throw, rush, sacked by Parsons. Heaves it deep down the left side for Gallup. He's got it. Touchdown!
It is time for another edition of the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report as we bear down on draft day this year. Bill Jones along with Kyle Yeomans, and I thought for sure Kyle would be wearing a green jacket this weekend, but there is no green jacket from you, Kyle.
Nope, I went to North Texas, part of the mean green, but that's one thing I still don't have in my wardrobe, sure. So I don't have a green jacket, nor has my golf swing ever been very good.
You know what we do have?
The big green
We've got a green notebook, though. You know what else we have? We've got the Cowboys Star magazine with the draft guide right here. And this is where I'm spending all my time leading up to draft day. Yes, it is a great time of the year. And how about we get started on this edition of the Blitz, talking about something that's been rare around the NFL the last 3 years. Go back to the 2019 draft is the last time that teams could have prospects actually visit campus, and that's what we've had this past week.
Thank goodness it's back to normal. You not only had the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Game, and then you go all the way to Indianapolis for the Scouting Combine, but it's a complete draft process for the first time since 2019 as 30 visits are back in the building. Cowboys hosting Dallas Day, and then also having 30 prospects in the Star in Frisco to finally get to know these guys a little bit more, put the final checks into the boxes and look at this draft class a little bit more in depth as they get closer to the last week in April.
All right, so let's dig in. Let's start with offensive linemen because the Cowboys obviously have a need. Guard position, of course. Connor Williams is now a Miami Dolphin. Lyle Collins, a Cincinnati Bengal. How about offensive linemen that catch your eye?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of them on this list, and it's right up at the top of the draft at the interior offensive line spot, and it's Zion Johnson out of Boston College and Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. Those are really the top two guys on this list. I'll start with Kenyon Green. He's probably been the more intriguing prospect early on in this draft process. Strong physical player. He was battle-tested throughout his time in the SEC, and he had some versatility playing every single position on the offensive line during his time in College Station playing for Jimbo Fisher and company, but he fits best at left guard. And of course, right now with Connor Williams off to Miami, Connor McGovern slotted in at that left guard spot. That is a huge question mark on the offensive line. And if it's not Kenyon Green at the 24th overall pick, another 30-visit name, Zion Johnson out of Boston College, could be the selection. He had better testing numbers than Green. However, he was a transfer from Davidson, went to the ACC, put up fantastic tape, was an All-American at Boston College, and ultimately put out 2 good seasons of fantastic top-tier play at the guard position. Well, he's still a little raw in a couple different places. There may be some position flex there pushing him to center, not necessarily the guard spot like I just talked about with Kenyon Green, but there is an intriguing side about his ceiling because of his athleticism and the stout tape that he put up in such a short period of time.
All right, and Amari Cooper now at Cleveland Brown. Let's switch our attention to wide receiver. And a couple of guys catch your eye as far as first-round prospects making a visit here to the Star.
Yeah, a couple first-round prospects, which is interesting with no Amari Cooper, but you still have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup in the room. Why are guys coming in and getting these 30-visit opportunities? Well, it's because the Cowboys have Treylon Burks to look at, a guy from Arkansas, big-bodied receiver, over 6 foot, 225 pounds. He has tape where he's running away from Alabama secondary and going up and winning those 50-50 battles. Some people even comparing him him to the Dez Bryants of the world as a big physical catcher at the second level, a deep threat for the Razorbacks in the SEC. Oh, and by the way, he can contribute in the backfield, so that draws comparisons to a big-bodied Deebo Samuel. Other than that, you've got a couple different guys that have come in as well. Chris Olave, a slot receiver, very shifty back-and-forth speed guy. Also a deep threat that'll stretch the field for Dak Prescott if he ends up being the pick. Both of those guys would have to be at 24 because they're not going to get them at 56.
You know what? I love these Georgia defensive players, though. And how about big Jordan Davis, a defensive tackle?
Yeah, and the Cowboys would be lucky if he's even there at 24. One of the more intimidating figures, as you can see there. I mean, he is just a massive piece of man on that defensive line. Brought in as a 30 visit, more just to see, hey, is he worth trading up to go get? I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 10 talent because he is as good as they come on that defensive line, and he was really the anchor for the defensive line of that national championship Bulldog squad.
All right, at 341 pounds, you can run a 4.78 40.
How can you do that?
I
How?
have no idea. What you hope is that an NFC East rival does not get a guy like that. Let's take a look at the needs and the prospects for the Giants and the other teams in the NFC East when we come back.
The Blitz is brought to you by AT&T, official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys, and by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. This segment is brought to you by AT&T, official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz. Bill Jones with Kyle Yeomans as we preview the 2022 draft. Of course, the Cowboys have the number 24 overall pick in the first round. Let's look around the NFC East, Kyle. And I think one of the real intriguing things about this draft is the number of teams who have multiple draft picks in the first round. Should make for some real intrigue. There's already been some trading going on leading up to the draft. The Eagles and Saints moved some picks. But let's start with the Giants because the Giants have the 5th and the 7th pick. And what might the Giants be looking at come draft day?
Well, I think the Giants probably need a little bit of everything. There's a reason why they're picking in the top 5, and then they have that second top 10 pick with the 7th overall selection. But I'm going to start with the edge rusher spot because that's really the top end of this draft. Aiden Hutchinson, followed by Kayvon Thibodeau. You could maybe put those guys vice versa a little bit as well. But those are two edge rushers that will be at the top of the draft, but with some tackles sprinkled in there. Maybe a Kyle Hamilton could intrigue some teams up in the top 5. Maybe one of those guys fall. However, I think either way, at 5 or at 7, they're going to have to come away with one of the top 3 tackle prospects. Ike Ekwonu out of NC State, Evan Neal out of Alabama, or a Charles Cross out of Mississippi State. All very good starting caliber, long-time starting caliber offensive tackles, and I think all 3 of those guys at some point, either at 5 or at 7, will be on the board, and the tackle position is going to have to be addressed for that Giants squad moving forward.
Even though the Giants a couple of years ago used a first-round pick on an offensive tackle in Andrew Thomas, but I think Ike Ekwonu would be, he's the guy that I look at and went, whoa, that guy, he's going to play for a long time in this league at left tackle.
There's an outside chance he even goes first overall. I mean, he's been in that conversation with the Aiden Hutchinsons and the Kayvon Thibodeaus to be up in that mix. Evan Neal even at times throughout the draft process has been there as well. I don't think they should shy away from spending another offensive line pick because, sure, you've got Andrew Thomas on one side. It's not a bad thing to have an Ike Ekwonu or a Charles Cross or an Evan Neal there as well. They need to address that offensive line and try and protect what they have in the backfield with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley.
All right, Washington has invested so much in front 7 guys in the first round on defense. What do you think they do at number 11?
Well, I think it's about time they go back to the offensive side of the football, and it starts at wide receiver. You've got a couple of pieces there, especially with Terry McLaurin, but I think offensively, you look at them at the 11th spot, you're not going to get one of those tackles. You're probably not going to have an edge rusher fall to you. Maybe a George Karlaftis out of Purdue, but even then you have Chase Young. You have that defensive line you've invested in so much already. So I think there's a chance you see the offensive side of the football. Maybe Drake London, who out of USC, big-bodied pass catcher, would be a great complement to McLaurin. Or you can maybe go to the interior of the offensive line and draft a center. You could draft a guard there. It's maybe a stretch in that regard, but they need that as well to protect what they have in Carson Wentz now in the backfield. But I would start with the wide receiver position. I think that could almost be written in pen at the 11th overall pick.
All right, and so what do you think the Eagles are up to? They make the trade with the Saints. They still have 2 first-round draft picks this year. They got 2 next year. I mean, they're loaded up, but what do they do at 15 and 18?
I think they're setting themselves up for success in the future. They don't like any of the quarterbacks now. They're going to give Jalen Hurts another opportunity to prove himself and then maybe go after a quarterback next year. Part of the reason why they used one of their first-round picks this year to acquire one and an extra third-round pick, 101 overall this year, and they get a first-rounder next year from the Saints. So I think they go kind of what the Cowboys need. Their needs line up exactly with what Dallas could use: an edge rusher, interior offensive line, and then also cornerback, maybe safety there as well if one of those top guys like a Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame would fall. I anticipate them making 2 picks, both at 15 and 18, that are going to make Cowboys fans very frustrated. It's going to be somebody that the Cowboys have looked at, maybe one of those edge rushers, maybe a Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa at center that could be off the board in the top 20, and the Eagles may be the guilty party in doing so.
Yeah, I think Linderbaum, he is the second coming of Jason Kelsey. They may look at him the same way.
Maybe perfect, yeah.
All right, we continue with more of the Blitz in just a moment. How about the linebacker position? Oh, I just love this guy, Nakobe Dean out of Georgia.
This segment was brought to you by AT&T, official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys.
The Blitz continues from here at the Star in Frisco. Bill Jones with Kyle Yeomans. We look at Cowboys' needs in this draft, and oh, that last year's draft was so kind to the Cowboys. Picking a linebacker, Micah Parsons, who obviously is not just a linebacker. He line him up wherever.
We didn't know that whenever they picked him either. We didn't know he could rush the passer. And he, by the way, is Defensive Rookie of the Year. That's fine. We'll take it.
We'll take it. Okay. Can you hit again on a linebacker? Can you use another linebacker? You got Leighton Vander Esch coming back. You got Jabril Cox out of that draft coming off injury, coming back this year as well. What do you think about in the first round, the prospects at linebackers, and if the Cowboys can afford to do that again this year?
I think they could, and depending on how the board falls, let's say you get dried up at the interior offensive line spot. You don't have a wide receiver there that you necessarily think is worth investing more into that position that you've used so much on over the last couple of drafts. But there's 2 guys up at the top of the board. Nakobe Dean is certainly the first one in the class, consensus All-American out of Georgia, and somebody who kind of was the head hunter, the leader at the second level of that Georgia Bulldogs defense. He's the one that leads the way. He's probably most likely off the board by the time 24 rolls around, but he's somebody that I know the Cowboys would certainly be interested in should he slide a little bit. The other one is Devin Lloyd out of Utah. A little bit of a bigger player. He's downhill, 6'2", 240 pounds, whereas Nakobe Dean's a 5'11", 230-pound linebacker, a little bit smaller. Dean has a smaller frame, but more of the traits, more of the tape, whereas Devin Lloyd is more of that downhill, bigger player. If they want to do that, they just got to make sure that they can fit him next to Micah Parsons. I think either one of those guys would certainly do so pretty well.
All right, let's move to the second day. Second or third round linebackers, is it a sweet spot there for linebackers?
I think it is, because when you talk about the Jabril Cox and then you look at Leighton Vander Esch, those 2 guys in Micah Parsons are all you have in terms of impact players. You brought back a Luke Gifford. You have some special teams players that can maybe fill in as depth pieces there, but it wouldn't hurt to have a developmental linebacker pushed into the fold a little bit, especially with Leighton Vander Esch on a 1-year deal, Jabril Cox coming off of an injury. Leo Chanel is the top one at the list. He's a Wisconsin linebacker out of the second level. By the time he took over a full-time starting role in 2020, he was one of the more feared headhunter, hard-hitting linebackers in the Big Ten. He put up fantastic numbers. He was great against the run. He was good in coverage. Doesn't need to be great in coverage because you have a guy like Jabril Cox, but Chanel is at the top of that list. Brandon Smith out of Penn State. Hey, drafting a Penn State linebacker has worked in the past. He's a little bit more tradey, but maybe a little more reckless with his aggression from the second level. That's one of the reasons why he could potentially fall as well.
How athletic is Leo Chanel out of Wisconsin? He ran a 4.5 with a 40.5-inch vertical and a 10.8 broad jump, and then 34 bench reps at his pro day as well. All right, day 3, okay? When you look at the depth of this draft, I think that you're going to find that prospects are really pushed down around because there's so many prospects in this draft. Linebacker on the 3rd day could be a real find.
This draft is not top-heavy, but because of that, it's exceptionally deep. Names like Brian Asamoah Jr. out of Oklahoma, Darian Beavers from Cincinnati, Terrell Bernard from Baylor. There's a great number of Baylor prospects that fly to the football, and he's another ultra-athletic player that did so for multiple years with Dave Aranda down in Waco. But my favorite of the day 3 linebackers, who may not even make it to day 3 if his stock continues to ride, Appalachian State DeMarco Jackson took the Senior Bowl by storm, and his competitive nature just really grasped me. I think he would be a great depth piece for this.
All right, one of the great stories in this draft, an offensive lineman. We'll have it for you when we come back here on The Blitz. Every year there's a lot of interesting stories leading up to the draft, and Britt Johnson has found one of those stories in this year's draft, an offensive lineman from Austria.
Bill, the 2022 NFL Draft does not lack in international talent. We have George Karlaftis from Greece, David Ojabo from Nigeria, who also spent some time in Scotland, and Bernard Ryman, who was born and raised in Austria before coming to the States in high school. Ryman played college football at Central Michigan, where he prided himself on a skill set that actually cost the Cowboys a lot of penalties this past season.
I would say it's smart, aggressive. So I always try to finish people, but never at the cost of the team. So I know I'm situationally aware of if we, losing, if we're up, like what's the situation, and I don't jeopardize a team win with my own actions. So that's something I take a lot of pride into, being smart enough about what I do in the football field and with my aggression out there.
Bernard Ryman's strengths at offensive tackle are due to his position change. In high school, he played wide receiver, and halfway through his collegiate career, Ryman was moved from tight end to offensive tackle. And at 6'6", 303 pounds, it's hard to imagine him playing any other position.
So I was playing tight end my first 2 years, and then coaches asked me, to transition in the spring of 2020, and I was a little hesitant at first, but I was just trying to give it up for the team because we didn't have anyone at the position, and then got my first practice and ended up loving it. Got really good one-on-ones against our DN Troy Harrison, and I just felt like I was involved in every game. I could actually really make an impact on every single play out there, and then I ended up loving it.
The Cowboys lost 2 of their front 5 during this past offseason, so it's a huge possibility the Cowboys could use several of their picks this draft to rebuild that line. Question is, do you see a guy like Bernard Ryman taking his talents to Dallas? Back to you guys.
Well, I will say this. He's a guy that I would have brought in for a visit because I just like to hear him talk. I just like the accent.
He does have
I'm not saying drafting, but I will listen to him for a while.
And I had a chance to catch up with him not only at the Senior Bowl, but also at the Combine. He's just an electric personality, somebody who's very easy to talk to. And he also has a chip on his shoulder. He says, I'm not just enough to carry the international flag and say, hey, I'm one of those international players. He wants to be better than that. He wants to be an All-Pro, wants to be a Pro Bowler. So he keeps a chip on his shoulder and makes sure that it's not just a PR stunt that he's in the league. He's here to play ball, and he's here to win some games.
And wrestler who's in track and field also in high school. And so there's a name to keep an eye on. And you can find out much more about all of these prospects. Where? Well, of course, it is in the official 2022 draft guide. It includes scouting reports on 110 prospects from our own Kyle Yeomans. That's what he's been doing the last several months. Yes, that and much more in the official 2022 Dallas Cowboys draft guide. And we're back with some jersey number changes. Ooh. You're going to change your number?
I'm not. No, I'm staying the same.
He's still number 1 in my book, Kyle Yeomans.
The Blitz was brought to you by AT&T, official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys, and by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
Final couple of minutes here of the Blitz. Kyle, how do you feel about single-digit numbers for cornerbacks? Apparently a couple of Cowboy cornerbacks like single digits.
I like it a lot. I think it looks slim. It looks fast. Jordan Lewis, who wore a single number during his time in Michigan. And then Anthony Brown just knocks the 0 off of his jersey. That's all he ended up doing to make the change.
Those are your new jersey numbers. And Dante Fowler Jr. wears number 56. I love the number 56 for a linebacker.
That's a good number. He wore that number while he had double-digit sacks in Los Angeles. He also did so in college as well. 56 feels right for Dante Fowler Jr. I think it'll look good coming off the edge.
And it feels right in Cowboys history, too, going all the way back to Thomas Hollywood Henderson back in the 70s. That does it for the Blitz. For Kyle Yeomans, I'm Bill Jones, and we will see you again next week right here on the Blitz.